human insight trumps every trick. We're not hacking systems, we're hacking behaviors so you won't click. No complicated code, just tried and true brain science at play. Social engineering for good, the best defense is in your mind today.
Welcome to Phishing for Answers. The opinions expressed here are solely those of the individuals involved and do not reflect the views of their employers. Get ready, because the next live episode of Phishing for Answers is starting right now with your host, Joshua Krumbaugh, the CEO of Fish Firewall.
Psychology is the new firewall, where human insight trumps every trick. We're not hacking systems, we're hacking behavior so you won't click.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Phishing for Answers. Today, we have Jayson Street with us. Hey, Jayson, why don't you introduce yourself? Although I doubt you need to. I think most people know you.
I wouldn't go that far. It's like I'm sort of known, but it's like I'm not the biggest fish out in the sea, so to speak. But I'm Jayson Street. I'm this Chief Adversarial Officer for SecureYeti. We're a company that does all different kinds of pen testing, all different kinds of blue team, red team kind of services, not just to like the pen testing side. What I specialize in is security awareness engagements. It's not about trying to catch someone and testing them. It's to teach them, show them what a real attack looks like, simulate the adversary as best I can, and then become a teachable moment for those employees and teach them how to better prepare for next time, or congratulate them when they do a good job.
I like that. I actually have a theory, and I want to see what you think about it. So my theory is this. It's, I guess, the vaccine analogy. And so how does a vaccine work? Well, we take a weakened strain of the vaccine, we inject it into the person so that their body can learn how to fight against it or defend against it. I see simulations or attack simulations as doing exactly that, particularly if we have really good just-in-time education surrounding it. Because what is our body's subconscious natural, or what is our subconscious's I guess responsibility? It's to defend. When something flies at our face, we don't have to think about raising our arm to block. We just block. And so I
Right.
believe that we run simulations to expose our users to weakened forms of the virus so that they can learn or develop an immunity. And what's really cool is when people learn really well about some of the basics, like how they're going to have authority used against them or urgency used against them, they'll start to see that everywhere. It doesn't matter that they learned it in phishing or if they learned it in vishing, they're going to see it everywhere because they've learned the tactic. What do you think about that?
I totally agree. Back in 2020, I don't know, I forget what sort of happened there, but something that there sparked my interest in actually learning about vaccines for some reason. And I
I don't
remember,
remember anything happening in 2020.
yeah, I don't know, but something, it was, I think it was like 40 years ago. But yeah, and I remember dealing with that. And I remember explaining to people, it's like, that's exactly what we are. It's like, I'm the vaccine. I'm mimicking the way that an attacker will go in. It's like, but my payload is only an educational payload, so it's not the full virus, so it's not going to be destructive, but it's going to be informing people to be like, this is what you look at, because a vaccine is showing this is what, when you see something like me again, I'm bad. And that's what I'm doing. I'm showing people, when you see someone do some of the things that I do, or act in the way that I act, or bring up things, or try to coerce you to do certain things like I was doing, now you realize it's okay to say no. It is okay to say, no, this is bad. This needs to be reported. I need to report to the central nervous system, like, hey, we're under attack. we need to respond accordingly.
Yeah. No,
But I
I
don't
I
have
I
the
like
payload.
the whole concept. I am the
Yeah,
antivirus.
yeah,
I don't know. I'm gonna have to start using that everywhere. I am the
yeah.
antivirus.
Well, and I tell people it's like I tell people it's like also another thing that I say is that we've learned early that the stove is hot, but we usually it's because we got burned. I'm there to show you the stove is hot, but I don't actually burn you. It's like I just give you the effects that you got burned, and so you realize, okay, I don't want that to happen again. But there's no actual damage done to you. It's just the psychological, like, oh, ouch, that's not something I want to go through again.
Yeah, I think something else happens though as well. Not only do they learn maybe some of the definitions, how to identify these things, but I think it becomes more real. When it's
Yes.
some company in the news, it's very different than when it's Cheryl from accounting. And that sort of evangelizing what happened. Obviously, we don't ever want to victim blame or anything like that, but evangelizing what happened, I think is critical because what really inspired me to found Fish Firewall was one specific incident that made me question everything I was doing in cybersecurity and or as a penetration tester. And it was that I had tailgated in off of the same person 4 years in a row. Never did that person get alerted, never did anything change, and because, I'm doing it, incognito, you expect that the learning experiences come after as part of that report, but at
Yeah.
least for this client, it was about nothing more than compliance,
Yeah.
and I know it made me ask the question because I was like, "Well, this company's compliant. They're doing all of the recommended, best practices for security awareness training." And I say best practices very loosely there. I'm just
Right.
talking about, the bare minimum PCI because there aren't really well-defined best
Oh,
practices here, right? And,
yeah.
P what does PCI say? Well, you gotta do phishing, and you gotta do security awareness, and you gotta train about these few things, and that's about it, right? So I use best practices very loosely there. But I really feel like it's so critical that those learning experiences actually make their way to the or the user population. And one of the tactics that I like there on a day-to-day basis that you don't have to have a penetration test for or anything like that is just user reported attacks. Hey, we just
Right.
saw, Susan just reported that this email came in, it was attacking her. Here's what we can learn about it. It's still way more real than when it's some company in the news getting hit versus you getting targeted and your actual company getting hit.
I totally agree. I mean, I call PCI compliance. I call it Schrodinger's compliancy because if you look at every news breach in the news, they're always,
Oh,
oh,
yeah,
okay,
they're
we're
all
PCI
compliant.
compliant till they're not. It's like, so it's Schrodinger's compliancy. You're always compliant till you're not. It's like
I
it's
like that.
ridiculous. And
Yeah.
so
Well,
and
I
one of the
also think
things,
if you treat compliance like the finish line, it'll become the finish line. And
yeah,
I mean, we've got to strive for best practices, and compliance just falls in line easily. Whereas if we're
yeah,
just doing compliance, we're only ever doing the bare minimum. And that's
oh
why
yeah,
it's Schrodinger's compliance, because if they were
yeah.
working for best practices, they wouldn't have those issues.
Well, and that's one of the things I love. One of the things that I love about the where I work is that it's like we are trying to, they allow me to do what I do because I don't do red teaming. We have like, oh my gosh, we've got Joe and we've got Nick and we've got Chris and we've got Kenny. We've got a lot of good red teamers, people that can break things apart and make your applications cry. That's fine. It's like, what I like to specialize in, what a lot of our customers understand is that it's not about just security awareness to the compliance and to the policy. What we try to show is situational awareness. We're trying to create this situational awareness employees. So it's when you said about the guy going through the door, one of the things that I do is I will get people to let me through in, to go in behind them. I will let people let me plug in their devices. And then I'll leave the building and I'll leave the site for 2 minutes. But then I come back in and I explain to every single person that I compromised, every person that I encountered, and I explained to them, guess what? I was a bad guy. What you did to help me sort of was against your company's best interest. I turned you into an insider threat. And don't worry about that. This was a training exercise. You're not in trouble. You didn't know any better because you'd never seen it happen in real life. And so that's why I'm here. Your company wanted you to understand and prepare for it. You're not in trouble. This was a training exercise. You didn't lose anything. You learned. And that's what it was about. And that's what I do on everything. I don't wait for them to read a memo 3 months later that they failed on a report. And I always make sure they succeed. I always give them a win. If it's better if I don't have to give it to them. They actually get it. But the whole point is, that's what we should be striving for, is for them to be learning about something, not just testing them to do a checkbox. It's about trying to teach them to do better and be better aware of their surroundings.
One point I want to add there is that I think it is far more critical that we catch them doing the right things and praise them than that we catch them doing the wrong things. And I see cultures where maybe it's very much the phishing simulations that they're running are very much around gotchas. And I don't see any real value in that. What I want is for the person to learn from it. And ideally that means that we don't start with the most sophisticated fish ever just to trick them. Let them catch a few, then we go more sophisticated. And I don't know that we should be using a whole lot of inside information in that either. And it's not that the bad guys won't. It's that there's only so much that we can prepare the user for, and we need to make it realistic. And that means that we don't make it to where there's zero indicators for that user to ever guess what it is. That's where our other controls should kick in my opinion.
Yeah, I think one of the key things is that we don't understand. It's like why they fail. It's like, this is the key issue, is like, because what I do not see what I do as social engineering or going after, like, you hear all these people talk about NLP and like all this other little micro. I don't understand any of that. What I understand is I'm attacking human nature. That's what I go after. And so what I try to do is I see it just on the basic. It's like one of my TISM superpowers is being able to understand how humans operate. And I will tell you this, any person that is watching this and yourself, that I know for a fact that at some point during the one of your drives, if you've had to go to school to home, home to school, or work to school, or work to home, home to work to home, those kind of things, those patterns, there's been at least one time in your life where you've arrived in your driveway and you had to ask yourself, either before you got out of the car, by the time you got to the door, you had to stop and think for a second.
How did I get it?
Did I go through that red light?
Yeah.
And that is because your consciousness, your mind, is actually processing all the things that you're trying to do, all of the things that your personal stuff, because your brain, your autopilot, the part of your brain that connects and does the automatic systems. Like, we're not thinking about breathing right now, but we're breathing. But now we're thinking consciously about breathing. So now we can control it. But usually the brain is automatically doing those processes. When you're driving like that, you're super focused on something, you've got a problem that you're trying to work on, your brain still knows what the process is. It knows where it needs to go, and it does that. Now, because it's a repetitious act of driving from one place to another, it knows things. If a child ran in front of the street and you were trained to be very situationally aware, or you were very aware of your surroundings still, then your mind will take over. And the better you are at situational awareness, the better you are at preparing for things like that, the quicker you will respond to intercept your brain's activities and to hit the brakes and stop the situation. Now, work is a little bit more repetitious than driving a 2-ton vehicle, because you're sitting at a desk, clicking on an email, or going and typing out a report. And so therefore, that's more where your brain is doing the automatic stuff a lot while your mind's thinking of other things. So when those phishing emails come in, or when someone comes and interrupts that process, you're still sort of in that you're not fully situationally aware that, okay, this is an aberration. This is just like a kid walking, running out of the street. I need to stop thinking this is automatic, and I need to switch into consciously addressing this situation.
Active mode, yeah. So
and that's what I try to show.
I love the driving analogy, because one of my favorite parts here is take that drive to work, from work every day. You are on autopilot, often.
Yeah.
And what about that time when you have a close call? You don't get in a wreck, but maybe you made a mistake, somebody else made a mistake, you both made a mistake, and it got way too close for comfort. I don't know about you, but I've had that happen. Now, the rest of the drive, the rest of the week, the rest of the month, what happens? You have a heightened awareness. You're not going into that autopilot state as much. You're watching out for these things. So close calls can be a good thing. And that's what I see these, simulations as doing for us, creating that close call. And it creates that hyper awareness. And ideally, though, I do prescribe to this thought that we can create human virus definitions. And when we do, and somebody learns, hey, urgency is always a red flag. Gift cards are always a red flag. Like, just these few key things, all of a sudden, hopefully they're detecting that and avoiding it completely on autopilot. And I've seen it happen a lot where people say, oh, I never reported that. But they did. They did report it. We go back to the logs and they most certainly did. So what's happening? They don't remember it because it was on autopilot. And ideally, that's how we create a human firewall, in my opinion, is by getting these secure behaviors to where they're on autopilot.
Right.
Same as looking both ways before you cross the street.
Well, yeah. And it's when you're going down the freeway and you see all of a sudden you go over a hill and you see a police officer waiting with the radar gun. The police officer didn't pull you over, but I think your speed changed for the rest of that trip. It's like you were like,
like you've been in the car with me, Jason.
Yeah, exactly. No, I just got a lot of speeding tickets. I have experience. It's like that's the whole point, is that it's just human behavior and what we're trying to show. And one of the things I tell my phishing the clients, when I call the employees on a phishing attack, if they succeed or don't, I always reiterate, there is power in pause. There is power in just saying, let me put you on hold for a second.
Yeah.
Let me
stop and
can I call you back? Exactly. That's what an attacker hates, is for you to pause. And they want you to react emotionally, not think logically. So the key thing in any of these situations is the employer, the management needs to get behind this and start encouraging this, is that they need to encourage and empower their employees to say, I'm not going to automatically do this. I'm not going to, I don't want to be considered a roadblock. I don't want to be considered someone that's always delaying projects, but I am going to be the person that says, I need to put you on hold. I need to verify this.
And that is the reason we have to empower our users and create non-punitive environments, because in a punitive environment, that user will not do that?
Well, I call it the 3 E's. It's like I talk about education, empowerment, and enforcement. So that's where mine differs a little bit, because I do have enforcement on that.
Entertaining. Make it
Yeah,
entertaining.
I try. Yes, it's like I always, when I do my talks and when I do my class, I'm doing it next week. I'm actually going on site for a company to do a internal security awareness talk where I try to be entertaining, slightly terrifying, and then educational. It's like for their employees and for their people. But the key thing is there's got to be all the aspects of it. It's like if I am playing a video game, and I play a lot of video games, and say I'm playing Fortnite or playing Call of Duty, it's like Unreal Tournament, which is, you know, the GOAT. It's like I want to play those kind of games. I'm the worst person to play with in multiplayer mode on my team. You're going to hate me on my team because I'm not there to be strategic. I'm not there to like, I mean, I've been in Call of Duty battles with like 11-year-olds trying to call out positions and tell me to right flank and get a sniper on a nest and stuff, you know, and to do a count. I'm running down the middle going, Leroy Jenkins, pew, 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 America, you know, I'm having a blast. And then I get shot. Oh, my bad. I respawn. And then guess what? Pew, 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 pew. But because there's no downside for me. I'm not losing anything. It's like I'm not there to be competitive. I'm not there to rise a profit. I'm there just to play and just to do what I want to do, to have fun. If you put, and I was then, this was a real life thing, because I've always talked about this in the virtual world, because I've always talked about if you put electrodes on me and then I play Call of Duty, and then every time I get shot, I feel an electric jolt. I'm like, oh no, there ain't no more Leroy. It's like, pew, 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 you know, hiding behind the little, boop, pew, you know, I'm hiding behind I don't want to like be a target. I'm not going to be running and gunning. And it was funny because I was in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia at this, in this festival, and they had a laser tag game going on, but they actually put electrodes on you in the game, and so they're hardcore. It's like, so when you got shot, you actually felt it.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Oh,
yeah.
Great.
There was no running and gunning Leroy Jenkins on that field, and that 13-year-old girl that just kept targeting me was vindictive and not nice. It's like, so I was not happy about that, but it's like that changes it.
That brings up a really good, I guess, segue and question that I have for you. So obviously in security awareness, all of us have considered the stick. But I think that the carrot is far more effective. What's your thought on the argument carrot versus stick?
I am 100% an advocate for the carrot, but with the exception of repetitive failure, it's like to learn, then I'm like, I'm not about the stick. I'm the glue factory. It's like I bypass the stick altogether. And the same thing is, I don't like when I'm trying to educate people, the worst thing I can do, and the worst thing I think a lot of security people can do, is talk tech and talk about the computers. Because people, when you talk about it in the related to computers, it's just too unknown still.
You're just intimidating them by getting too technical on a subject that they're already intimidated on.
Exactly. I drive a lot. We've already proven that with my speeding tickets, but I don't even know where my spark plugs are in the car. I couldn't change the spark plugs if you threatened my life. I wouldn't know how to do it. It's like, so that doesn't make me stupid. I can operate the vehicle the way that it needs to be operated in a safe and secure manner, but I don't know anything else about it. and everybody thinks that's fine. But when people operate their computer in a safe and secure manner and they don't know anything about for some reason that makes they feel embarrassed about it, or they feel like, oh, I'm just stupid, I don't know how to work a computer. Why should you? So I equate things with the vehicle. So now let's go with that. If you hire an employee, because part of your job, your company, they do deliveries, and you hire a delivery driver, their job, the reason why they were hired is to deliver packages in the vehicle. So in other words, the vehicle is the company equipment they were given to do their job. So even though their job is to deliver packages, when they were given a piece of that company equipment, the van, they have to operate it in a secure and safe manner. They have responsibilities, job responsibilities, that having that piece of equipment entails. Making sure that it is secure, making sure that it's locked when they leave to go on their breaks, making sure that they use their turn signal, hopefully. It's like making sure they obey all traffic laws, making sure no one's allowed to put any packages into the van or take any packages out of the van that are not authorized. They are responsible for the operation of that piece of company equipment. And if they damage that piece of equipment or they allow things to happen to that piece of equipment, 9 times out of 10, when a delivery driver totals a van, they're let go. No. They lose their job because that's $70,000. Oh, that's so much money. We've got to let them
way
go.
Bigger with a cyber incident very quickly. But
exactly.
So let's rewind. I want to talk through something you said a little bit more. You said on repeated failures, you think that we should break out the stick. So first example I want to give you is the guy that inspired me to found Phish Firewall.
Yeah.
Tailgated in off of him 4 years in a row. My opinion is he should not be fired or in any trouble because clearly the data never got to him. And if we're not making sure that people are aware of their mistakes and aware of how to avoid them again in the future, I think it's our failure, not the user's failure. So that's the first part. Do you agree? Should this guy be in trouble here?
I would.
Uh-oh. I think I'm losing you. My internet or yours? Jayson, I seem to have lost you here. He hated the question, everybody. He hated the question. I'm joking. We'll give it a minute here. Yeah, I should have a slide with like technical difficulties that we can play with some music. If this happens. Here he is. He's back.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Was there a disconnect?
Yeah, we lost you for a minute. I had just asked you what you thought, and you started to respond, and then it just went dead. We didn't hear anything.
So what I would do is on even the first year of the guy letting me in, it's like I would have conducted the rest of my engagement. I would have done the damage that I was going to do. And then with a representative of the company, we would go to his desk. We would find him. And I would tell him to his face, I just need you to know I'm a bad guy. I was not supposed to be let in, and you let me in. It's like, I'd have a conversation with him. I would say, what were you thinking when I went through the door? Did you think that I was like one of the employees? Did you recognize me, or did you think that I was familiar? What made it where you thought? And I would go over it with him so he would understand fully, like, oh, I should not be doing that. He would not be in trouble. He would not be. The only reason why the other employee, my point of contact is with me, is so they understand that it's legitimate and that I'm not trying to pull a fast one. But they would understand that they're not in trouble. But they would be educated right there on the spot. They wouldn't The next year, I would have stopped him immediately after he let me in. I would have said, hey, dude, you just let me in again.
Well, I don't think if we're doing proper training, that's gonna happen 2, 3 years in a row. So I agree with
Right.
you about how that should happen there, and if it continues, yeah, then we've got a bigger issue. But the more
Yeah.
common failure that I see that leads to firing, all the time is phishing, and I see a lot of
Yes.
3 strikes and you're out policies. So let's talk about this worker. And I want to put some context into this first because I don't want to just leave it at 3 strikes and you're out. Because to me, I don't think phishing susceptibility is as simple as a 3 strikes and you're out policy. So the
Right.
example I give is, we've got Mary from accounting and she falls today for one, and it's using urgency. And then, she maybe gets better at that. She learns about it, but the next one's using authority that she falls for, and she falls for that one. And then the next one's using scarcity, and she falls for that one. Maybe the next one's using authority again, but it's a different play on it, or urgency again, and it's a different play on it. I think that there's a lot of complexities to phishing, and that people need to be able to fail more than just a handful of times in order to really build those immunities. So that's my only concern with policies like that. I mean, I think if it was more holistic, a little bit larger of a number, we were fishing more frequently, I'd be more okay with it. But the way it sits in most companies, I don't feel like we've even fully trained the user before we're firing them for not understanding how to detect a fish. Because there's like 20 key indicators that you're
Yeah.
gonna see all the time, and you're not just gonna overnight get them trained in all of
Right. One of the things that I think people mistake me for is because I'm very blunt and direct. It's like I tell people it's like I get paid to lie for a living. I don't do it for free. But also I'm not very good at filtering. And when I'm not on the clock or not masking, I am very just. I'm a very literal person. I'm very like this is what needs to be done. It just needs to be done.
them. Yeah.
This is not a black or white situation. We cannot make it an either or situation. There's no situation hardly that I've ever encountered that was, oh, it was declared like this is bad. I mean, it's like, I mean, there are certain things that you can go and have an absolute statement. It's like water. Well, actually, technically, water is not wet. That is a sensation that we're feeling that makes it wet. It's like the sky is blue, but
Hey,
not really.
coffee doesn't give you energy. I just learned this the other day.
Yeah,
It only lies and tells your brain you're not tired, which is different than
exactly.
actually giving you energy.
The sky's not really blue. It is just the way that the spectrum filters and stuff.
Yeah.
One of the only universal truths I can think
Go
of off
down
the
a
top of my
rabbit
head.
hole there real quick, huh?
Oh yeah, Nazis are bad. We can all agree with that. That's an absolute. I
I
understand
would
that.
think so, but
Yes.
Kanye
So there
clearly
are
doesn't
absolute no.
recently.
That is an absolute and a hill I will gladly die on.
Me
It's
too,
like
me too,
so,
me too.
so the key thing is very simply is this is that yes, she fell for 3 different kinds of text. If a company is not properly training their employees, then how can they fire them for not doing what they were supposed to do when it wasn't impressed upon them what they were supposed to do? So I am not saying, oh, if they fall for 3 fish, you just let them go. There are plenty of ways, and I do, and this is
And I
not
only brought
a
that up because I still see it used frequently, not because necessarily you're
yeah,
advocating for that. I was just
yeah.
curious what your stance was there.
I think what our security, what our industry has to do is get a whole lot better at realizing that their employees that they are protecting are not future threats. They're not future liabilities. They are
Asset.
assets and they are
Yes.
part of their team,
I think I've got a
and that they
clause
need to
here
start
somewhere.
looking at them. They need to look at them as an asset to their company, that part of the security team. If you are not educating the employees on day one of hiring, that guess what? One of your job responsibility is that you're also a member of the security team, and it's your responsibility, just like with everything else on your job responsibilities. One of those is to operate and secure your equipment. And if you don't know how, then it's our responsibility to make sure you're aware of it. So the security team is not there to catch you do something. They're there as a resource for you. You ask them the questions you need to ask. You show them the suspicious emails. If you have to forward them 3 emails a day because you're just not sure, you send them 3 emails a day, and they should say thank you after end of the day each day. It's like,
not even just thank you,
participating.
but praising you as well for doing it. I
Exactly.
completely agree, and that's the reason I think we've got to, as an industry, define best practices of what should we be doing from a security awareness perspective. So from that, I'd like to go down that path for a little while. I've
Right.
got all kinds of opinions on best practices around security awareness, but what are yours?
I want to share. I do. I'm literally working on building a whole talk around this one guy who inspired me. It's the head of the CISO, head of cybersecurity for Alpine Bank. I have permission to use his name, and I want to give him the credit. I think his name's Ross. I'm not sure. It's been a long. It's been a. I wasn't prepared to bring his name up, but
I was just laughing.
he deserves.
I got a kick out of the way you said that, but continue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's like, well, I'm terrible with names to begin with, but he deserves
Me
the
too.
credit.
Me
And
too.
it's like, and in my talk, I actually have a screenshot of his LinkedIn profile with his name on it. And in this talk, I'm going to be working on, I do it as well. When I went last year to go talk to his bank on security awareness, I didn't know I was going to have so much of an education about the stuff they're
You got a
already doing
master
there. It's
class, huh?
amazing. He had stumbled. He didn't stumble. He developed one of the best security awareness tools I've ever seen in my life, because it actually deals with it. I've been talking for a decade on gamification and making people understand that the employees are never going to care about your data. Make them care about just doing it anyway. And so one of the things that I show is this. It's like, I go and tell him, I told him what I was thinking about it, and he told me that he does a phishing competition. No, every employee, one of the biggest things they resent is the security team doing an internal phishing test. Effing Bob in
That's
security
why we
sending me
have
another
to
phishing test.
gamify phishing, by the way,
Yes,
because
but
otherwise it's a negative experience for employees. I want to come back to that. Finish this, and we'll come
well,
back to that aspect.
well, at this bank, this is something, a phishing test is something that people look forward to every year. It is something that no one resents. It is a competition. He has set it up ingeniously. It's like, and I don't know if this is exactly the way he's done it, but this is the way that I envision it, that is being done, is that he has got teams, like one branch going after another branch, HR going after legal, legal going after executives, IT going after marketing, marketing going after HR.
Yeah.
It's like all these different. So now, instead of security being the one sending us a phishing test, now it's a competition. And if you run that all year, and then at the end of the year, it's like in October, maybe, I guess, because that's the one that we want to say is Security Awareness Month. It's like, have rewards. There's 2 rewards. There's an award for the team that got the most clicks on their email, and the team that clicked the least. But
So,
through the whole year, it's like people are being phished, and it's not just all at one time. They'll send these phishing emails out to these teams at different periods during the year. So everybody's got to be on guard. You don't know. Is this a phishing test that it's like it's just a criminal one or something that's just a suspicious email, or is this freaking Bob's team trying to get us
So
right now?
I think gamifying is great. One cool thing about anything hands-on like that, if you have the time to have your users create fish for the other people, they're gonna learn a lot about phishing and how they work and the different
Yep.
indicators by creating fish, more than they'll ever learn by observing fish.
Well,
So
and one of
that
the things that I
hands-on
help.
really does help them learn a lot there. But I think there's other ways to gamify. One of my favorite ones is what I call fishing tournaments. And you do the same thing all year long, but what you're looking for instead is reporting. So we're going to
Right,
continuously run fishing simulations, but you're going to have to report them. And then at the end of the year in October, you give awards to the departments, your locations, your divisions, whatever way you want to slice the cake, but you figure out how to slice it and you give awards to your top performers. So
right.
I think there's a lot of ways that can be done, but
Oh,
one thing
definitely.
that I find really critical is telling people you're going to fish them ahead of time, making sure that they know. In this bank example, the users knew because they're involved in it, so they know they're going to be fished.
Right,
And so now if they fall for it, it's maybe not as negative of experience. The example I like to use is imagine the little old lady who's close to retirement age. She's been, passed over for a raise the last 5 years in a row because she's timid. And so all of a sudden she gets an email telling her she gets a raise. She clicks on the link, it takes her to a login page. She can't get logged in, but regardless, she got this email saying she got a raise. Now she's excited about her raise. She and maybe even goes and brags to her husband about it. And all of a sudden, waiting on her in her inbox a few minutes later, 15, 20, 30 minutes later, an email from a supervisor saying, "Hey, you failed this phishing test. You're in trouble." And maybe even potentially her job's on the line. That is a
right,
terribly negative experience and an emotional roller coaster. I think things
right.
like that are almost more likely to create like purposeful insider threats because we're treating our people bad. Whereas if we change the script, what if we say, "Hey, let me tell you about this fish that pretends to be from the finance team or from the benefits team." And then we say, "Now be on the lookout because the next time you see it, it could be us or it could be the real bad guys." Now, if somebody falls for it, we make sure that there's a landing page with immediate just-in-time education. We don't have some landing page where it's not obvious that they made a mistake. And that way they can learn. It's a different experience. And I think we really have to think about what kind of experience do we want to create for our employees. And we have to make sure it's a learning experience. And if we're just tricking our users without the training, what's the goal? What is the point other than for a
Right.
risk assessment? And outside of penetration testing or red teaming, I don't see the point of running continuous risk assessments on phishing. I see the point of running continuous phishing for learning, but not for the purposes solely of getting that blind, asset or risk assessment. What do you think?
Well, I have two observations for that. One is when you said that you don't want them to see it as a negative thing. It's like you do want them to be conditioned to be getting tested, to think that it's going to be an intro. The reason being, though, is human nature. People do not like to think about something negative. They don't like to be thinking that they're being targeted by a criminal because that's scary. That's not nice. That is the reason why they tend to they self delude themselves because they don't want to think that they're actually in a bad situation. That reminds me of Pearl Harbor in 1941 with the radar station. It's like where they were told, it's like there were planes coming in from an unknown vector. The supervisor, not hearing a radio report that was supposed to tell him that things were okay, he heard that. So he knew that training planes were coming in that day, and he would rather believe that it was the training planes than something negative because he had, that bias because we don't want to assume something bad is happening.
Yeah.
It's like
It's easier
fly on
to
plane.
assume it's the IT department all the time. Oh, it's just the IT department trying to trick
So
me.
if we tell them, hey, by the way, we're going to do a lot of phishing tests all the time. You don't know where. Now they're more thinking, oh, this was a phishing test. They're just trying to see if I'm paying attention. I'm going to report this so they know that I am. And that way there's no negative
Yep.
like someone was targeting. So they're more likely to report it that way.
Agreed.
The
Agreed.
second thing that you were talking about, um, crap. It's like I was so busy, I don't know what you were like saying. You said several different things. It's like, what was the last part you were talking about after the part about, oh, the lady with the, again, I have made it a point, and I understand that other teams do this and other companies do this. I will never, ever craft a phishing email that actually it makes something imperative. It never makes people does an emotional trigger. I am totally, fully, 100% on the record against using emotional triggers in emails. The phishing emails that I've created, and a lot of them have been successful, and it's better when they're not because that means they're doing the right thing. But I've always made sure I've added lines such as, while this is not required, we would appreciate if you would take a look at this site. Or, hey, you don't have to do this, but if you want to go and find out more, click here. It's like, I do not do emotional triggers. It's not because the attackers are not using it. It's that we should be effing better than the criminals. Yeah, we need to emulate the criminals up to a point. Okay.
Oh, I agree. You don't tell people that they're getting laid off or
Yeah. Or
that
they're
they're
getting a
getting a
bonus.
pay cut or that they're getting a bonus and they're not
None
getting
of
it.
that.
Yeah,
I will do.
I completely agree. And yeah. We are almost at time here though. So any sort of final words of wisdom before we wrap up? And hey, I may have to get you back on the show for a part 2 because I feel like we're only just beginning to scratch the surface here of and there's so much more to talk about, but I
Yeah.
digress.
I think that the biggest thing that I'd like to impart on people is that, especially if they're not in information security and they're not part of the security team, they think, hey, it's like security's job is to handle phishing emails. Why are
Mhm.
you not giving them their work they're supposed to be doing? You don't think they're doing enough right now as it is. It's like, help them out. If you think that you received an email that is somewhat suspicious, even a little bit,
Forward
that's
it.
a little,
Yeah.
that's forward it to them.
Use the
That's their
reporting
job.
button, whatever you have, get that over to the security team. I
That's their
agree. And
job.
to me, that is the best measure of culture.
Yeah,
I don't care nearly as much about your fish click rate as I do about your report rate. I want to see a
right,
90+% report rate when I send an email, 9 out of 10 people send that fish back and say, "Hey, we got
right,
this." That is an
exactly.
effective human firewall.
Yes.
All right. Well, hey, thank you so much today for joining us. Jason, stick with me. For those of you joining remotely, we'll see you again tomorrow.